Yesterday's prophecies, today's headlines. This is the Hal Lindsey Report. And now, Hal Lindsey.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hal Lindsey Report. On June 11th, U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korea's Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un met in Singapore. The summit was historic because it is the first time a sitting U.S. president has met with the leader of North Korea. The day started with a one-on-one meeting between the two leaders with only their interpreters present. It moved to a larger meeting with officials from both sides present, then concluded with a working lunch with the expanded delegation. At the end of the day, the two leaders signed a joint statement. It declared their intention to move forward with negotiations aimed at the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Chairman Kim apparently offered to completely scuttle North Korea's nuclear and ICBM program. He also indicated a desire to resolve the decade-old conflict between North and South Korea. President Trump offered to suspend joint military exercise with South Korea and provide security guarantees to the North. Plus, he offered to help modernize North Korea's economy through private investments and international assistance. However, he emphasized that the economic sanctions will remain in full force until he is convinced that North Korea is making good on its word to denuclearize.
And we get it done.
Chairman Kim also promised to return the remains of thousands of American soldiers who died in North Korea during the Korean War. Of course, this summit is only the beginning of what may be a long process toward denuclearization. And the North Koreans have proven to be less than reliable in past negotiations. But time will tell. We'll talk more about these developments in future programs. For the latest information on their meeting, please visit hallindsey.com. In addition to news, you will also find my weekly commentary as well. Meanwhile, the NATO Secretary General, the King of the Netherlands, Prime Ministers from 4 nations, the Vatican's Secretary of State, and 95-year-old Henry Kissinger all showed up last week for the annual meeting of the Bilderberg Group, held this year in Turin, Italy. It is a secretive meeting of the business and government elites who in many ways run the world. But despite the secrets, there are always leaks. Here's what we know about the year's conference. It focused on artificial intelligence, robotics, genetics, and the coming merger of human bodies with machines. In other words, they focused on technologies that will play a crucial role in the Antichrist's future one-world government. The meeting's participants would mostly scoff at the notion of Antichrist. They would say they are working to preserve and improve humanity. The Bilderberg meetings began in 1954. For their first few decades, hardly anyone knew about them. The press of the time intentionally kept it quiet. Even today, participants are sworn to secrecy. Bilderberg leaders say the secrecy allows participants to speak their minds freely. In other words, they might say things that will not offend their fellow globalist elites, but would outrage or frighten the public. A few years ago, one of the group's founders, Dennis Healy, revealed Bilderberg's real agenda. To say we were striving for a one-world government is exaggerated, but not wholly unfair. Those of us in Bilderberg felt we couldn't go on forever fighting one another for nothing and killing people and rendering millions homeless. So, we felt that a single community throughout the world would be a good thing. In 1991, several French newspapers published a quote from that year's meeting. They attributed it to David Rockefeller. We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promise of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during those years. But the world has become more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries. Autodetermination comes from a French expression that means self-determination. Fear of self-determination, or democracy, is standard fare among global elites. The idea of a supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite goes back at least to the writings of H.G. Wells. He wanted to put academics in charge of everything. Richard Gunderman is a professor of medicine at Indiana University. He summarized Wells' position like this. Wells believed that humanity's best hope lay in the creation of a single world government overseen by scientists and engineers. Human beings, he argued, need to set aside religion and nationalism and put their faith in the power of the scientifically trained, rational experts. Folks, that is the definition of tyranny. It is the opposite of government of, by, and for the people. The phrase supranational sovereignty is fascinating in the light of Bible prophecy. It doesn't mean eliminating the present nations. They would continue, but there would be another governmental authority above those nations. That's exactly what the Bible described happening during the tribulation period. Globalists have had things going their direction for a long time. But in the last 2 years, new and extreme nationalist movements have threatened their plans. They're most worried about European nationalists, but it's actually a worldwide phenomenon. As I've noted before, both the globalists and nationalists are signs of the end times. According to the Bible, the globalists will win, but only temporarily. Not long after Antichrist solidifies his position as world leader, the cracks will begin to emerge. Global government will end with a world war of unprecedented horror. We often refer to it simply as Armageddon.
In this 2 audio CD set, Hal Lindsey presents an in-depth study of Acts chapter 21. He calls it Paul's Amazing Fall from Grace. This 2 CD set can be yours for $14.95 plus shipping and handling. You can purchase Paul's Amazing Fall from Grace by calling toll-free 1-888-RAPTURE. You can also purchase online at hallindsey.com or by writing Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470-470, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74147. Order your set today.
Tommy Robinson is a right-wing British nationalist. Bilderberg-style elites see him as one of the most dangerous men in the world. By the way, Tommy Robinson is not his real name. He believes it would endanger his wife and small children to use his real name, though it has recently been revealed. He's been attacked and beaten by Muslims on many occasions. Threats against his life are common. He now works with a right-wing Canadian news organization. Tommy was arrested in late May for reporting on the rape trial of a British Muslim grooming gang. On this program in September of last year, I reported on Britain's problem with those gangs. Suffice it to say, we're talking about child rape and sex trafficking on a massive scale. Because grooming gangs are a Muslim phenomenon, they have become a huge embarrassment to the powers that be in England. And Tommy Robinson pulls no punches when talking about Islam. In other words, the British establishment does not want Tommy reporting on the subject. So British police arrested him for simply live streaming the defendants entering the courthouse. Not from inside the trial itself, but standing on the sidewalk as they entered the building. In a matter of 6 hours, he was arrested, tried without sufficient due process and representation, and sentenced to 13 months in jail without even being fully informed of the charges. But that's not the worst part. The judge who issued the sentence then ruled that no news outlet inside the UK could report on the sentence. Can you believe that? The judge's verdict was so unjust, so unfair, that he was willing to abridge his fellow citizens' right of expression in order to keep his own actions secret. Breitbart London reported the story like this. The Leeds Crown Court has issued a UK media ban following the arrest of well-known activist and citizen journalist, redacted, outside redacted. The reporting restrictions, which require on all publications within the United Kingdom to cease any mention of the details of the arrest or court proceedings of redacted, was issued Friday afternoon. In 2013, the New York Times reported, Britain has a long tradition of free, inquisitive press. But they added, unlike the United States, Britain has no constitutional guarantees of press freedom. That's why it's important to get things in writing. A long tradition can be erased by a short judicial ruling. Tommy Robinson has consistently warned Britain about fake refugees who have no intention of integration and no intention of assimilation. In today's United Kingdom, that's more than controversial. It's blasphemy against the new god of political correctness. But does anyone honestly believe that the majority of British Muslims are in fact integrated into society? Can anyone honestly say that most Muslims there want to assimilate? What Tommy Robinson said is true. I've discussed this danger extensively on this program, but globalists believe they can tame Islam, and their method is appeasement. Give Muslims anything they want. Turn a blind eye to obvious truths and threats. Rape gangs? Just look the other way. Terrorists? They must not be real Muslims. Globalists pretend that Islam is a religion of peace because they want it to be. Above all, anyone who speaks out against the Islamization of Europe must be silenced. Tommy said, there is a reason why the state fears me in England. It is because we can bring people together, and we are going to enter into a new era in Europe where everyone is going to unite against the Islamization of our countries. With Christianity as a wellspring, English society spawned a movement toward the rights and dignity of all human beings. It spread to the American colonies. Over time, those ideas spread across Europe and most of the world, but the nations of Islam are a glaring exception. Christianity represents the flourishing of human rights. Islam represents the destruction of those same rights. So why is it seen as radical that Tommy Robinson wants to unite people against the Islamization of Europe? To understand it, all you have to do is read and understand Bible prophecy. The message that God has given me is more important now than it's ever been, for the church and for the nation. That's why I'm asking you to help me to expand our reach.
To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470470, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74147. You can also support this ministry online. Visit hallindsey.com or call 1-888-RAPTURE.
And thanks for being a vital part of my team. Kate Spade had the world on a string. She designed a line of handbags and launched them in 1993. They were a smashing success. Over the years, she branched out into other lines. The public saw only success. They saw a rich, famous, and respected woman with a great life. We did not know the depression and anxiety she was fighting until June 5th of this year. That morning, a housekeeper found her dead. The medical examiner's ruling on her death said, cause, hanging. Manner, suicide. 3 days later, another world-famous New Yorker made the same fateful decision. Anthony Bourdain, the chef and television host, was found dead of an apparent suicide in a hotel room in France, again by hanging. He is considered one of the most influential chefs in the world. He had his dream job, traveling the world for CNN, meeting the people and tasting the cuisines of diverse cultures. Once again, from the outside, he seemed to have it all. Right after Ms. Spade's death and just before Mr. Bourdain's, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control released an in-depth study on suicide in the United States. The study covered years 1999 through 2016. During that time, a number of suicides in America rose almost 30%. Suicide is now the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. There is a suicide in this country every 12 minutes. In 2016, 45,000 Americans died by their own hands. Just like with school shootings and the drug epidemic, we need to be asking, what is behind it? The CDC said, our data suggests that suicide is more than a mental health issue. They're right. It's also connected to drug use. 31% of the time, opioids are found in the blood of the deceased. But drug use is yet another symptom of the same underlying problem. They're looking for escape in a bottle, in a syringe, or in death. What are people trying to escape? Despair? Hopelessness? Meaninglessness? If you have children, think about them. They are constantly exposed to a worldview that tells them they are mere accidents. They get that message in their classrooms, on television, in the movies, from music, magazines, and friends. You owe it to your children to understand what they're being exposed to, because all the weird things happening aren't really that weird. If you look at the ideas behind the tragic numbers, the results become completely predictable. If we leave a piece of iron outside exposed to the rain and wind, it will rust. If we release a light bulb from our hand, it will fall. If we don't eat, we'll starve. The laws of chemistry and physics produce definite results. In the same way, the ideas taught in schools and entertainment can clearly be seen in our age of anxiety. Here's the equation. Anxiety minus an answer equals despair. Parents are overwhelmed. Their children are overwhelmed. Both groups have been intellectually cut off from real answers. In many cases, despair leads to violence. In others, it leads to depression or to lasciviousness. Our society has come to believe that there is neither right nor wrong, and they've been taught to automatically disdain any solution that involves God or His Word. Even our grade school children are being inundated with this philosophy. In schools and universities, brilliant men and women thoroughly committed to a worldview without God use their great teaching skills to convince the young that there is no real hope or meaning. In the classroom, Jesus has been reduced to a swear word. The Bible is barred and ridiculed. Is it any wonder that a whole generation is in despair? Is it any wonder that drugs and alcohol are being used on such a massive scale? It should be no surprise that schools have become violent and abusive, or that they have become spawning grounds for drugs. It was predictable that discipline and order would disappear from our campuses. Students are adrift in a sea of moral confusion, and so are their parents. As a society, we are approaching the end of the long decline described in Romans 1. The New Living Bible puts it like this: since they thought it foolish to acknowledge God, He abandoned them to their foolish thinking and let them do things that should never be done. Their lives became full of every kind of wickedness, sin, greed, hate, envy, murder, quarreling, deception, malicious behavior, and gossip. They are backstabbers, haters of God, insolent, proud, and boastful. They invent new ways of sinning, and they disobey their parents. They refuse to understand, break their promises, are heartless, and have no mercy. They know God's justice requires that those who do these things deserve to die, yet they do them anyway. Worse yet, they encourage others to do them too. Those are hard but real consequences for refusing to acknowledge God. That's where we are as a society in the United States. But most lives, there comes a time when bread and circuses are not enough. We're no longer excited about the next new iPhone or the next superhero movie. We want something more. Deep inside, we sense that we have real significance. We know that our lives have meaning. Evolution and science can't tell us what that meaning is, but we know it exists, and we know it is real. Right now, millions of people around the world are questioning. They're seeking, and that's good news because Jesus said, "Ask, and it shall be given to you. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it shall be opened." Do human beings have real and lasting value? Do you? God says you do. He made you in His own image. He loves you. But He is a perfect being, and we humans are sick and sinful. Our sin separates us from Him. He could have left us in that sorry state, but He didn't. He sent Jesus, His only begotten Son, to take on Himself our sin and the penalty of our sin. The Bible says God demonstrates His own love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. That is our hope. By accepting the free gift of pardon that Jesus died to purchase for every person, you can be accepted by God into His eternal family. You can then look forward to an eternity of happiness in heaven after this life is over. And it's so simple to do. In your own heart and with your mouth, just tell God in your own way that you understand that you have sinned and can never make it to heaven on your own. Ask Him to forgive you of your sin and make you clean. Believe in your heart that Jesus truly is the Son of God and that He will do everything He has promised. Then simply accept the free gift of pardon that God has promised to everyone who believes and asks. If you did that, then you have just joined God's forever family, and you are now a child of the living God. Welcome home. Well, that's it for tonight, folks. God willing, I'll see you next week.
You've been watching the Hal Lindsey Report. To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Hal Lindsey Media Ministries, P.O. Box 470-470, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74147. You can also support this ministry online. Visit hallindsey.com or call 1-888-RAPTURE.